Carl and Brendan here from Games, Brains and Head-Banging Life, gbhblofficial.com for short. And it's the first episode in a new series that we're calling Sometimes Dead is Better, Stephen King movie adaptations. You know who Stephen King is, don't you? He's a pretty famous horror author. Well, pretty much famous author because not everything he's written is horror-based. Love him or hate him, he is iconic. Even if you've never read a single book, you know who Stephen King is. Chances are, if you've never read a book, though, what you might have seen is one of his movies, or many of the movies that have been made out of his work, dating back to the earliest stuff, things like The Shining, all the way up to something more modern, like It Chapter 1, 2. There were more, I've forgotten all the names off the top of my head. The ones that were on Netflix, random ones.
1922, Gerald's Game.
Stuff like that. There is some, and there's more supposedly in the works. They range from laughably bad, some of the ones like the TV miniseries, we're talking about It, Tommy Knockers, the Langoliers and things like that, to his very own, his only time he stepped in the directing chair himself, which is to adapt one of his own fucking stories called Maximum Overdrive, the only film he ever directed, which will be a great one when we eventually get to it, because that also has a second adaptation called Trucks. But, you know, we'll get to that at a time. When we decided to do this, we thought, okay, we know Stephen King. Both of us have read a lot of the works, you more than me, and we both grew up watching a lot of his movies, books, adaptations, stuff like that. So it seemed like an obvious thing to do. Let's start talking through these movies. If you've watched the other series on the channel, The Nasties, you'll get an idea of what we're doing here. We're going to talk through the movie, some of its talking points, our opinions, a plot summary, and so on and so fucking forth. You're going to get strong opinions here. And the idea was, let's just randomly choose one. There's no point starting at the beginning. There's no point starting at the end. Why do it that way? Let's just choose one. So Brendan pulled one out of the air and he chose 1408. This is, of course, a 2007 psychological horror film based on Stephen King's 1999 short story, very important, short story of the same name. That short story appeared in Everything's Eventual, which is a collection of 11 short stories and 3 novellas by King that was published in 2002. Now, 1408 was a movie I'd seen once before, many years ago, and I didn't like it. I remember distinctly not liking it for a lot of reasons. I'll quickly run them off now because this is quite important to what I'm going to talk about later. I didn't like it because I didn't like John Cusack, who plays the main star. I never liked John Cusack. I think he's an all right actor at best in any movie he saw, and I always thought he was often the worst part of that movie. I didn't like the advertising. I didn't like the fact that the cover put Samuel L. Jackson on half of it, when Samuel L. Jackson is in it for about 5 fucking minutes. Now, it's not the first film to do that, nor will it be the last. So I'm not entirely sure why I was so harsh on that, because now it doesn't bother me in the slightest. It's like, that's just advertising. Samuel L. Jackson's a big fucking name. You're going to put him front and center. I have watched movies where it says, and starring so-and-so, and they've been in a movie for like 30 seconds. And I'm like, you dickheads. But of course, because that name has value, it's marketing. So I don't actually have a problem with that anymore. But the biggest reason I remember not liking it is because everybody told me it was a scary film, and it wasn't. And that's still super important for me. After rewatching it for this, I'm like, it ain't scary, but my opinion has changed on so fucking much. It's downright shocking.
That's interesting.
Yes. Shocking by how good I think this film is now compared to what I thought back then. And for a lot of the reasons that surprised me, that have changed completely. I don't know if it's an older head, a more nuanced reviewer's mind where I'm looking at certain things in a different way and all that, but it was a fascinating re-watch of picking apart. And because I enjoyed it so much, we decided that we would only talk about the adaptation if we had read the book, e.g., if we've neither of us have read it, we'll try to read it potentially, depending on what it is, but if we can't do it, we can't do it. But this was one I was like, this is a short story. I've got to reread this. So I have Everything's Eventual sitting over there, open it up, like 30 odd pages, and quickly reread it. And I was like, okay, cool. Now I've got that to talk about as well. As an adaptation, yeah, all right, cool. It's a short story. You've adapted it. You've done a pretty decent job of it overall, to be honest, based on what I read. No problem with that. The short story itself is, if I'm honest, it's crap. It's so short and so like, ugh. I was like, all right, it's nothing special. The movie's better, put it that way. And that's a rare thing. I think the movie's better than the story. But that was potentially going to happen when it's a short one. You know, we're crossing that bridge later on in life as well in regards to Stephen King. That's my bit. Go, Brendan.
Yeah, so I mean, like, obviously, you know, I obviously I've read everything's eventual. I know the book inside out, and I know this story very, very well from that book. And I also know like the history of this story in that book, which was that it was not meant to be in that book. And actually it was originally written just to be an opening section of one of his memoirs books. I think it was the On Writing.
Yeah.
To display how something can change from one part of a story to another. He decided it was cool enough to stick it in the book and put it as a short story. So I completely understand, like, I guess why it maybe doesn't feel fully formed in the book format, like it was an afterthought, because it was actually an afterthought, yeah, to a degree. So, you know, as a I guess, you know, I can see both sides of the fence on that. I'm like, on one side of it, look, dude, if it wasn't fully formed, just don't fucking put it in there. You know, on the other side of it, it's like, oh, okay, you know, well, like he felt it had a little bit in there, so like, why hold it back? Let people have it. So, you know, I can understand that. I think I firmly believe this, and this isn't just King related, but like my main experience of this is with King. I firmly believe that short story to film works well. Book to film is too much, and that's why I believe the trend with not all but most of Stephen King's work is when somebody takes one of his large books that focus very, very heavily on character development and building suspense and everything, and then try and shovel that into a 90-minute fucking film. The only way they can do so is to cut every bit of build up and go, oh, give them the highlights, and it just doesn't fucking work. But most of the examples of adaptations of King that I like are, and that I think are done well, are when they take short story format and they convert that into film, because actually it's almost like the short story can just become the script to a degree.
Yeah.
Now there is a massive difference between 1408's story form and the film, and that is that obviously the I don't know who transposed it for film. I genuinely don't, but whoever it was, they changed the ending, and that was the biggest difference. You know, like massively changed it. Which isn't the first time that's happened, actually. Like, it's sort of like people like King's films and then go, oh, yeah, but we don't like how he ends it. I think they did the same with The Mist, actually.
Yeah, often it's been a consistent thing with King of films is actually the endings tend to often be massive, massive letdowns. So hell, if you change it and make it better, and we'll get into the endings because there are 3 endings to this movie, but we'll talk about that when we get to the plot summary. But you are right. A change sometimes no bad thing.
No, it's not always a bad thing. It does depend, like, I guess, on how invested you are in the story version of it. But, you know, like some of the things, like I didn't disagree with most of the things you said at the beginning, to be honest with you. I've no particular affinity towards John Cusack. I felt the same, you know, seeing Samuel L. Jackson in it. I did enjoy this film on my first watch. You know, I don't think it's very difficult these days to put anything down as scary. I don't think I would have classed it as scary, but I think it's got a certain creepiness to it, which I quite enjoyed. You know, not scary as in like, oh God, I'm gonna, like, I don't know, I'm gonna, yeah, that sort of stuff. But I thought they handled creepy quite well at times. Yeah, I think they did a decent job overall. But I don't know. I'm a difficult one on this, and I know I am as well, because I have read a lot of Stephen King works. I don't think there's a single Stephen King thing that I've ever watched that I haven't already read. When I was younger, it would have been the opposite way around. You know, I was actually the other way around. I was watching things that I had never read, and then as I got older, I caught up on the reading and then sought out them. And obviously, like you sort of suggested already, you know, King, I don't know if there's like a ranking of the most adapted kind of author to film, but surely like he's up there, isn't he? Like,
well, I'm sure you remember we did a tier list a long time ago where we ranked almost all, but not every, pretty much all the major Stephen King movie adaptations that we had seen. So if you kind of want to get in it, and I'd imagine if we did that tier list now, we might even change things around.
But I mean, in terms of
with.
number, like King's been basically when the horror, sometimes indie horror, sometimes more mainstream, or sometimes like massive fucking Netflix stuff. Yeah. But when they run a bit dry, I assume they have a list on like Excel or something, and they go, which King shit ain't we done yet?
Which one can we redo?
Yeah, or which one can we redo? And obviously, as interesting, but like connected in a way, but only like slightly, is obviously as King's one of his children, Joe Hillstrom King, has become more prominent, I guess, especially like I think there's a TV series called Lock and Key, which helped to catapult him into main things. But outside of that, Horns and things like that as well, which are all very, very good books, has also kind of pushed him into it now. So it seems that people are now going that way. Like, for example, there's a massive horror movie being trailered at the moment, which we both know well because we mentioned it about talking about site a while ago, which was from a short story by Joe Hill called The Black Telephone or The Black Phone. And I urge anyone who is interested in anything Stephen King to watch the trailer for that and tell me how many King resemblances you pick out. like genuinely, it's fucking. Firstly, it does look like it could be a pretty cool movie, which probably means it's gonna fucking suck. It could be one of those like, oh shit, they're showing us everything in the trailer. When I watch it and I'm like, that's from that movie, that's from that other movie that by his dad. So King, like, in a way, it's a negative, I guess, in a way, because we all want like unique stories, and the problem is that I am a fan of King the author, who is not always involved. He used to be, and that's the one of the things. Actually, in a weird way, he used to get himself too involved in the fucking adaptations, and actually, that was sometimes for the worse. It was sometimes better for him to step back, and some of the better ones are when he's not been involved at all. But I don't know, what are they, like 50, 60 TV series, film, and shorts as well. If you get into some of the what's it called? The creep show sort of side of things that King's mind has provided to horror over the generations, which is amazing.
What's it called? There's a movie. It's an old movie, very cheesy. What's it called? About human people that turn into cats and are killers. That is not a Stephen King book.
Nightcrawler. Is that no, not Nightcrawler?
Skin crawler, skin something. Oh fuck, I can't remember it. But it's not a King book, but it's a King script. He wrote the script.
Yeah.
That's another example of yeah.
There's another. I'm pretty sure it's not a book, which is called Century Hospital. What's it called?
Okay.
TV series, like a limited TV series, like a 4-parter. But that's actually very, very fucking good. So
the point is, we will get to these things as well. It's everything really, not just the adaptations eventually, but also Stephen King's fingers have been in it some way or another. And because that's the biggest thing you got to bear in mind is, while this is an easy start for us, 1408, it's a film, it's straightforward, it is exactly what it is. I'm already partially looking forward to, but terrified of, oh, cool, time to do The Stand. Oh, great. Like, that's the terrifying but exciting part as well, because it's the fucking Stand, which is a great example of an epic story done pretty well, because it was split into 4 parts.
Yeah, it'd also be interesting when we get to that, because as we will know, not just with The Stand, but also when we get to other things like, say, It, for example, is what version.
Of course, I haven't seen a single episode of this new TV series, and I heard that most people didn't like it. So
my god, it sucks.
Oh, there you go.
God, it started off like with 1 episode of promise, and then they just decided to, let's just be dicks for the rest and not bother.
We should add as well, this isn't focused just on horror. We will, of course, The Shawshank Redemption, The Green Mile. These are adaptations that,
The Dark Tower.
Yes.
My God, strap in for that episode.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, we'll keep that in mind. Right, so we've set up what it is. Let's just get into 1408 and we'll talk it through as we go along. So directed by Mikkel Hafstrom, and as already said, stars John Cusack and Samuel L. Jackson. They are the both highest billed. You'll understand if you watch the movie why Samuel L. Jackson is probably second billed, is because, truth be told, everybody else is a bit part player.
Yeah.
It's John Cusack's movie. It's his movie. And that's cool. But some of the supporting cast includes Mary McCormack, who plays Lily Enslin, Tony Shalhoub as Sam Farrell, Lee Caro as Mike's father, and Jasmine Jessica Anthony, who plays Katie Enslin. These are the faces that make the most appearances through it, alongside John and Samuel L. Jackson. Now, incredibly, a $25 million budget, which is very expensive considering what it was, I think, but it grossed $132 million worldwide. So, Jesus, what money? What money was made from
Absolutely. I mean, they must have spent. I remember. I'm sure you may touch on it as well, so I won't say too much. But like, I remember reading in some of those stuff about this that I think they filmed like the exterior of the hotel in New York, but filmed the interior in London.
Yeah.
So you just think like, how much of that 25 million was just like fucking flying everybody back and forward, all the studio equipment to go all the way to London? Surely you had a fucking hotel somewhere in America that you could have done up.
Well, I was convinced while watching it that I was like, I'm saying to my wife, right, so they obviously, what they must have done was built 4 of the same hotel rooms next to each other, so you could progress this movie as it went along. It wasn't 4, I think it was 2 in the end. But that's kind of makes a bit more sense. But I was surprised that it wasn't as many as I thought, because I'm like, okay, you're going to build several, and they're going to be deterioration and the things that occur in each particular one. But apparently didn't go that far with it. So credit was credit's due, because if there's one thing this movie does better, what blew me away this time rewatching was shots and how they filmed this one hotel room, because that's what it is. We are staying in one place, really. Yet we're not, if you watch it. So it's not going to be beat by beat. I'm not telling you the entire story. It's a plot summary. We'll talk it through as we go along. So we are introduced to Mike Enslin, who is basically a cynical and skeptical author. Yes, Stephen King tropes. It's an author who's also battling issues, potentially alcohol issues that's hinted at but never fully addressed. But the skeptical part and the cynical part really comes through, because he writes basically niche books evaluating supernatural events, top 10 scariest hotels, top 10 scariest places to stay, but he has zero belief, and he has no problem expressing that to his fans. This is what I immediately, at the start of this movie, I knew I'd got it wrong about John Cusack, because how he portrays this tired and I don't believe that author, I was laughing. I was like, this is fucking excellent. I get it, and I thought it was fascinating to sort of see the lack of care he had to the people who were coming to his book signing, for example. But I also saw that he recognized himself as a hack, and they do that well, where he comes to a book signing and the guy doesn't even recognize him, and he has to point at the picture on the book like, that's me. I thought that was cool. Now, it's notable here, and we're going to drop it in, even though the film doesn't really explain this until halfway through and towards the end, but Mike's estranged from his wife, and it's relating to the death of their daughter, Katie. Now, it's kind of hinted at as you first go on that, you know, he's got problems and stuff like that, but it's not properly explained until the movie, and you get some flashbacks back towards the death of the daughter, Katie, who died from cancer, leukemia, I guess, or some childhood disease. So Mike does a book signing. He's written his latest book, and while going through some posts and all that, he gets an anonymous postcard that talks of the Dolphin, a hotel on Lexington Avenue in New York City. And the message simply says, don't enter 1408. Again, top actor from John Cusack, his reaction to this, the smile on his face, like the fact that, like, all right, okay, cool. Like, you know, I was like, oh yeah, he's intrigued, but he's not wowed by it. Like, he's used to getting this sort of thing.
Seen this before,
Yeah, absolutely. But he does decide to take it up as a challenge, go into the Dolphin, where he wants to stay in room 1408. But he runs into problems. They will not let him book this room. So he goes the legal route, which I thought was fascinating, because the short story also delves into that as well. The fact that, and it does this thing about whether it's an actual law. Now, it turns out this law is real, but misunderstood in the film. In that, yes, it's true. If a hotel room is empty and whatever, they cannot deny it to you and all this kind of stuff. And they go there, but simply the hotel can simply get around that by just saying it's not inhabitable, it's this reason, or it's already booked. You could do all of these things. The film tries to explain this away by sort of doing a whole honesty route, and the fact that Samuel L. Jackson, who was the manager, Gerald Olin, he explains it like, oh, I'm just, you know, I'm not. We're still a respectable place. We're still going to do it right. We're still going to do this. We're going to do that. He just tries to talk Mike out of it. This scene where Mike and Gerald Samuel L. Jackson and John Cusack is the best thing in the film. Yeah, the bit in the office, it's the chemistry between them two. It's the back and forth. It's the way he slyly, Samuel L. Jackson tries to almost blackmail him, or like, you know, with the offer of the whiskey, and then trying to talk. But also, I got the fear of that room through Samuel L. Jackson's acting here. The discouragement, the way he asks him. It goes further when he takes him up the lift and all that. And the last words he says to him is like, please. Like, and he calls him Mike. It's the first time he calls him Mike. He refers to Mr. Enslin all over at that point, and he says, oh, Mike, please don't do this. Oh, man, I thought it was fucking brilliant.
Yeah, I agree. I think like even up to this point, like in the film, I always felt like because of Mike's backstory and the fact that, you know, like you said, he was estranged from his wife due to the traumatic like loss of a child, that he was also on a destructive path.
Yep.
Like in a way, it was like he didn't believe anything that he did. He didn't even care about debunking anymore. Like I felt like he was almost like, you know, I don't believe in any of this shit, but you know, fuck me. Let's hope it's real this time. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like he was on that almost self-destructive path. Didn't believe in anything anymore, but would just like walk in front of a truck if someone said he might see something there.
Yes, that's actually something I 100% agree on, because part of that comes from as well. If he could get some proof that the afterlife existed, he could find some potential connection for his daughter.
Absolutely,
like he'd stop believing in God because of the death of his daughter.
Yeah, and as for Samuel L. Jackson, I guess the best praise for that scene is that like at no point in that scene did I see Samuel L. Jackson as Samuel L. Jackson. I saw it 100% as a hotel owner, but also just as a considerate human who didn't necessarily believe in a lot of stuff happened, but just knew a lot of bad shit happened when people stayed in that room, and just didn't want that on his conscience.
Yep.
Like, do you know what I mean? It wasn't like he was like, oh, there's ghosts, or like he did. And that was great because he was so subtle, because actually if he'd have come into it all, you know, his character was all like, oh, there's demons and ghosts. Like, you know what I mean? It was almost like he didn't really believe it himself, but he just knew that there was a big old book, weren't there? A massive old file of, I don't know, like whatever, a couple of 100 years or 100 years worth of history. And he was just like, look, people stay in that room, bad shit happens. Please don't. Have a bottle of whiskey. Well, I think it was like whiskey or something like that. Like, have this, you know, have a drink with me, you know, come talk to me. Like, let's find you another room. We're going to put you up in a real nice room. Like he was so believable in his short segment that like, I didn't even really register that I'm watching Samuel L. Jackson. I was watching a concerned hotel manager, you know?
Yeah, the delivery, the lines, the way it builds up here. This is also, to me, the scariest point in the movie. In part, what I generally felt the tension in the air, because, for example, you talk about the file. It's there, the film then reveals, and he reveals to Mike something Mike didn't know, because ultimately when he was investigating, all he was finding was accidents and suicides and all of that. What he'd missed was 56 natural deaths in that room. And you're right, it was over 95 years and no one has lasted more than an hour. He talks about Samuel Jackson's character, the hotel owner. He talks about how when it comes to turning the room over, a light turnover every month, the door's left open, the maids are in there for 10, 15 minutes, he monitors it. And Mike, obviously trying to play it down, talks to ghosts, and Samuel L. Jackson's character, the hotel owner, he doesn't say that. He says, and this is what I love, this isn't about ghosts. And he says, no, it's just an evil fucking room. Now, I do believe that line was written and it went, well, who do we need to say that? Well, it's got to be Samuel L. Jackson, because the book, the owner is a white, pudgy man, as is described in the book. So it's quite a contrasting difference to have a very, you know, not fat Samuel L. Jackson black man and all that, but it's a change I don't mind. I'm more than okay with it.
You're never going to describe Samuel L. Jackson as a white pudgy man for sure. You know, absolutely. But I don't like, you know, I don't know how you like feel generally overall as Samuel L. Jackson. I think Samuel L. Jackson's a fucking good actor. You know, and so short and sweet segment as it is at the beginning, but also like in the little moments where he pops up in the film. You know, it just solidifies that thought for me. Like the dude, like he came in there, he had a small job to do, did it to fucking perfection. Went home, probably had like a whiskey and a cigar, and just sat there going like, I'm fucking cool. I'm good at this acting and shit.
He is, but I also want to praise. This was like I said. This is the points where I was like, shit, I might have had this wrong about John Cusack. He's killing it. I was so impressed because as well as he approaches the door, You can see he's nervous. You can see like, and he's constantly almost saying in his head, "Oh, like he's gotten inside my head." Now the difference in the books here is the stuff immediately starts when he gets to the door about it being off shape almost.
Yeah,
it doesn't do that in the film. It waits a little while until he's in the room. But I will also give the film credit for not hanging around at all, because once he's in the room, it starts almost immediately, subtly, but it starts completely. Because Mike likes to talk to his mini cassette recorder, and the room just seems very bland, very boring, very run-of-the-mill hotel stuff. But we start to kick off, and it's just a visual noticeable difference. It's this, he talks about feeling a vibe as well, like it's a bit more suffocating, and the thermostat doesn't seem to be working quite properly. But it's when the clock radio changes to start playing We've Only Just Begun, a hit song, of course, by The Carpenters. And then the digital display changes to a countdown starting from 60 minutes. So this is his hour, basically. Now, initially...
taunting him.
Yes. But initially I thought, well, that's a bit cheesy. You've kind of put a time limit on the run of events. I forgive it now because I understand what that hour means when we get to the end of the movie. But at first I was like, oh, don't put a countdown on it. That's just like, what happens at 0? Well, does he just die or implode? No, we'll get to that. It's actually very cool. So then basically shit that starts going on around him. And sometimes it's differently done. He sees ghosts of the rooms past victims, which are done in this really cool celluloid visual style, which I thought was really interesting as well. Like the kind of flashy celluloid old film. Yeah.
I think, I mean, you said that at the beginning as well. I think, I love the fact that the film isn't actually glossy. Like, because it's not, and actually it feels like an older film, I think, when you watch it, because of some of the way that they film the footage, but also because of the interior of the hotel, because even the interior of the hotel is quite old school, isn't it? It's quite retro, really. It's like travel lodge level. But yeah, like the same, for me, like when he approaches the room, you can kind of see the battle, I think, internally between, and I think that's because he acted it so well, but between his kind of broken heart saying it doesn't matter anymore, but his head saying, oh, like, actually, you know what, maybe be a bit careful here, and his heart wins out and he goes in anyway. And it's like you said, the pacing is good, like, as in it doesn't hang around, but also it's not so stupidly in your face that it matters. Like, actually, those moments at the beginning of him talking into his little recorder, walking into the rooms, gently opening up like a cupboard and being like, oh, okay, there's nothing there either, temperature fucking thing's not working, it just gives it just enough build up so that actually when shit happens, it's not just ridiculous. Like, he didn't just open the door, close it, and then the whole world went to shit. It's subtle without being slow,
Well, yeah, he also spends a lot of time early trying to rationalize everything, as a lot of people do who debunk stuff, will try to rationalize it. But I did particularly love the point where rationality goes out the window and he says, fuck this, and tries to leave. But of course, now he can't. The doorknob comes off, the door won't open, he can't leave. And that's kind of where things really kind of get things. He starts to get flashbacks and visions, not just of Katie as well, but also his sick father. An underlying plot point that never really comes to much, but it's kind of used to give him as well, to almost make it seem like what his hallucinations are. So, for example, he's in a bath at one point, and his father, I guess, who was in hospital with dementia or cancer or something, and he's on his lap. When we pan out, he's kind of on the toilet instead, and it's not there at all. That's the aspect I love, because it made me realize, okay, this isn't about scares in the conventional sense. It's about the psychological edge where what's real and what's not. And that's how he gets beaten down by the room, where it's like, okay, it got the perfect victim in Mike. He was already such a damaged individual. Yeah. He was an easy target.
Yeah, and that's what it does. I think that's what they wanted it to be. It was like we play on your negatives, we play on your fears, and that's what it does. It tries to hammer them home. Like, there's no positives. Everything drains away. The color drains away. Even in the way that they shoot the movie, it feels like it becomes washed almost as the film progresses. And it all just fades away to try and leave him with this feeling of desolation, and then gives him his final choice.
Yeah, we'll get to that part as well. But along the way as well, as things kind of come apart, and I guess he becomes a fucking believer in the sense that all that, he does seem to get lucky. He's able to use his laptop to contact Lily which is his estranged wife. And this is kind of where we get the detail about the relationship a bit more. And he asks for help, but the room isn't having none of that. So it turns the sprinklers on. I did laugh when that happened. I was like, what a dick. What a dick. It let him get that far. And it was like, nope.
I really like the idea that, and I know this may not have been what they thought, but this is what I took from it, of the idea that maybe this room had got all sorts of fucking retro shit covered, but it didn't know Wi-Fi.
Interesting, right? Because why? Yeah, because it
was also old-fashioned and retro, and like, you know, I don't know, like it's not always the case, but like often, whether it's possessions or demonic or whatever it might be, it's always something that's come from the past forwards. Like, do you know what I mean? So this dude with like a little metal box, like, how is he managing? The demon could be watching that shit and just being like, how the hell is he even managing to talk to this woman?
Yeah, what's
crazy.
This?
What's this crazy shit?
No, that is cool. It is cool as well. And this then follows into what is a series of changes to the room that I just love, and it's the drop to the drop in the temperature as it drops to freezing, and you start to get this understanding. And bear in mind, this is all taking place over an hour, but because of how it's done and how Mike's still talking to his recorder and trying to justify what, not necessarily justify what he's seeing, but trying to talk about what the room is doing to him, it feels like it's weeks. Like he's in there for weeks. And he's trying to light a fire to keep himself warm. And you're like, the fuck is going on as he's wrapped up in a blanket? I love that. Again, it was just a visual cool look.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I agree with the whole, like the length of it, because it does feel like you feel it as well. That's the thing. Like, it doesn't feel like you're just watching like all of this stuff happen in 45, to 60 minutes. It actually feels like, and I think that's probably down to both the pacing of the film and the way that he's acting it. But it feels like you're kind of on that journey with him, like he's been in there for ages, and then it will flash back to the clock, and it'll be like 48 minutes left, and you're like, really? What the fuck?
It's been 12 minutes, yeah.
And you're like, oh yeah, there ain't no way. Like, I can see why they say no one makes it past an hour.
Yeah, because that's the fun thing. You're like, okay, what does that mean, and how's it going to play out? But it continues because like it doesn't seem to like want to stop, because you're thinking, okay, well, what's its next goal? And his laptop starts to work, so he runs over to it, he crawls over to it, but in it, it's a contact and Lily again. This time, it's him talking on the screen, but it's not him. It's a doppelganger, if you want. And this doppelganger is a bit more confident and saying, hey, come meet me at the hotel room. We'll have a chat and all that kind of thing. And he's trying to scream to her not to do it, but she's like, all right, I'll get in a cab and come see you. And then the doppelganger winks at him. And I was like, that's really like, again, like, is it like you said, okay, it worked out what it was. I was like, I'm going to use that to my advantage now. Yeah, it was really it's evil, an evil room.
I've learned Wi-Fi.
But then as well, like, then we get the ultimate, the room's starting to shake and the walls beginning to crack. I love this because this comes after some other points where he tried to escape out the window, which is a great scene, and a really long wall.
Yeah.
But also the room also bricked the window up afterwards. So it seemed like he was in a sealed place, which in my belief is that brick wall never existed. It was, again, his hallucinations and so on. But as it begins to crack, I started to get that feel. I'm like, I started to picture in my head, and this is what I love, and let me imagine it, that this room is an entity, and that when you step into it, you go to almost a different dimension. You're in a place of hell. And if that room fully cracked open, you might see things beyond those cracks, things that you don't want to see, the darkness beyond kind of thing.
Absolutely. And as my ever obsessed Dark Tower mind, I was always seen this as we know through the Dark Tower series, that there are doorways.
Yeah.
And the doorways to the levels in between, the dark place in between the levels. That's what I always, there's no reason to believe it, but it's what I always believe 1408 to be. Is this was, like that monster house that Jake went into to end up with the gunslinger.
Yep.
This was one of those places in between. This isn't a ghost, like you said. It's not a fucking possession. It's not like a poltergeist. It's not a demon. It is the whole space.
Yep.
Is an evil space.
It's the air. It's what
it's not even like about the room per se, like, because actually like you see in the film, the room, it transforms and changes and transfigures. It's the space where he's in. When he walks through that door, through 1408, which is also meant to be, because you can add them up and it comes to 13. And that's unlucky. But if you walk through that door, you've stepped into that space in between, and this shit is evil.
Yeah. So kind of gets towards the end of it here, the big real ramping up, because there were basically paintings as well in the room, quite old-fashioned paintings. And Mike starts to notice them transforming into more horrific sights. But one particularly, which is to do with a ship in a storm, it really comes to life, and he starts to hear the sounds. And in a moment of madness, he breaks it. And I love this effect. I'm sorry, I just love this. It floods the room. And I can't confirm this, but I watched it carefully and then rewound it. I don't believe this was a stuntman, because in a scene, the camera keeps close. And to me, if it's a stuntman, he looks exactly like John Cusack as he gets washed down into this room and slammed in against the wall. It looks exactly like John Cusack. And I was like, yes, John, do your own fucking stunts for this scene, because it's a full-on flood of water, like bursting out the wall.
There's no fucking about with it. Like it's done. So, like I agree. Like it actually, like, because it sounds stupid, doesn't it? You go, oh, he broke the painting, and then all the water come out of the painting and flood the room. But it's fucking intense, man. It is a really intense scene, because it is like real force. And like, we're not talking about the room slowly flooding or anything like that here. We, like you said, it's he's being tossed about like a fucking ragdoll.
Yeah.
And yeah, I agree with you. Like, I think this was him. I think this whole movie was him. I think like he took this on as his thing, and like I don't think there was a stuntman involved. I think this was John Cusack, like just giving it his all.
Yeah, and it really does come across so impressively. But what this leads to is him now waking up on the beach. Now, we didn't mention it because it was a throwaway scene at the start. And I remember when it occurred, I said to my wife, that was pointless, because I couldn't really remember a lot of how this movie panned out. He wakes up on the beach because earlier in the movie, he went surfing and got into trouble and then was woke up on the beach choking on water. He then wakes up following that surfing accident. And immediately I was like, oh, okay. I was like, no, I don't think that's the case. Couldn't quite remember. And you're kind of waiting for the rub. You're waiting for the whole, it's all a trick. Yeah. But it doesn't. As his life properly continues and we follow along with him as he kind of goes about his business, reconciles with Lily as well at one stage as well. And it kind of goes on a while. We're talking a good 10, 15 minutes. And you're kind of like, oh, was it just a nightmare? Especially as Lily encourages him to write a book about it.
Yeah.
And he does. He appears to write a book, including getting as far as going to the post office to send the manuscript to his publisher. And I remember I said to my wife, like, this is like a vision or a nightmare from the room. It's really elaborate. Like, it's really gone far with this one.
Yeah. It'd also be a really disappointing like way to end the film. It would have been, really? Come on, man.
Yeah, it would have been quite a Stephen King ending where you're like, oh, right, that was it. It's the hand of God. It's the giant spider again. It's all that stuff. But I mean, when we get to the post office, if you keep your eyes open before he notices, you'll notice it. Because the crew, the people involved, there's a construction going on now, are all people we saw earlier in the movie, members of the Dolphin Hotel staff. He quickly cottons onto that, looks around, realizes he recognizes them, and they all start to destroy the post office walls in an incredible scene, ripping the walls down, the floor up, to reveal it's the exact room 1408. He's still inside it. Now it's a shell, though. It's a fucking wrecked room. Love it. Thought it was really well done.
Just fucking with him. That's what I love about it. That's exactly, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And that's and you know, that's always such a key like proof of that whatever they're trying to convey on the screen's working. But you know, it was like, you know, we hammered him, and now we're gonna give him that like almost like that light at the end of the tunnel, and then we're gonna fucking shut the tunnel, and like that's it.
Yeah,
you know, you're back.
Yeah.
It was heart-wrenching, man.
But it's still not done. So like I said, I had actually bought into the concept that I'm supposed to hate this room, hate what it does and what it stands for and what its goal is. But I think it actually goes over the top here. I think it's just downright beyond. As the last sort of section as the countdown is coming to an end, is Katie's ghost confronting Mike. Now, Mike still refuses to believe she's real, disputes it and stuff like that. And it's actually quite heartbreaking to see his resolve break at the very end as he reaches his arms out to hug her. And I'm like, damn it, Mike, you lasted. Like you were still saying, no, you're not real. And then you finally gave in to it. And the countdown runs out. And you're like, what now? And the countdown restarts. The room is returned to normal. And the countdown is at 60 again. And Katie crumbles in his arms to dust. And I'm like, that is fucking evil. Yeah. Evil.
It is exactly what it's meant to be. And it's horror, but it's horror of a intellectual level, because that is the whole scene, like you said, it's heart-wrenching, it's horrific, seeing him break, but understanding exactly why he would have, like the room, you know, it threw everything physical, like in a way, and psychological it could at him, and then it, all right, that didn't work. Here's your dead daughter.
Yeah.
You know?
But it leads to a simply what I think is a spectacular, almost ending, not the ending as thing, as the phone rings and Mike answers it. And I love how calm and assured he is here. He's almost just like, whatever, man, I'm done. And basically the hotel operator speaks to him, and Mike asks, why haven't you killed me yet? And she tells him that guests enjoy free will. I thought it was fascinating. The room can't kill you. It can't kill you. It drives you to kill yourself. He can relive the past hour over and over again, or use what she calls their express checkout system, which is such a great line. We see a hangman's noose appear, but Mike just ignores it and says he's not ready to check out yet. And I was like, yes, Mike, do not give up. But ultimately I knew, well, you're not getting out of this room. And because she's like, okay, then no worries. And the countdown starts again and all that. And you're like, oh, so you're just going to have to go through it all over and drive you to madness to eventually you will commit suicide.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was quite proud of the ending here, as Mike basically creates a Molotov cocktail and says, well, fuck this. If I'm going out, I'm going to bring the room down with me. We can't use it if it's burnt. So he throws the Molotov cocktail, and I do love the sound. There's these distant almost roars from the room, I guess, and that's a real interesting touch. But again, Mike's like, I don't care anymore attitude, because he has this cigarette. He doesn't smoke anymore, and it's behind his ear, and he says it's there if nuclear war ever breaks out. And obviously this is now his time to smoke it, because he's like, well, I'm dying, so yeah, I'm gonna fuck this room up. And I do truly love, because you see the hotel being evacuated, and you see that his wife just arrived in a cab, and that she was coming up to the room. But Mike's final, well, not final, because we'll get into the actual ending, but his final task for this room, and I didn't quite understand it at first, but then I realized, oh my God, he smashes the window, which creates a backdraft, forcing the room to explode. And it's a spectacular explosion and stuff like that. Now, I'm not going to lie, I felt like I would have been potentially happier had this been the ending, and he died in this fashion. I'd have found it very heroic and very uplifting. What's called it? We'll get to the endings because it's 3 endings. But before that, we should note that he lies down and he laughs after, he's going to won. And we see Samuel L. Jackson's Olin in his office praising Mike, like, for his actions. He says, like, well played, Mr. Olsen, and stuff like that. So, like, which does beg the question. You never considered that yourself, mate? I mean, I suppose you're not going to set the room on fire, are you? Because it's a hotel. You risk burning the whole thing down.
Yeah. There is like a counter sort of theory as well about whether Samuel L. Jackson's character is more involved in what happens there than actually you think. Like, we know Mike gets an anonymous kind of postcard inviting him there. We also know that he kind of, like, although it's believable, he goes down the route of, like, we know no matter what happens, Mike is going into that room, but he goes down the route of going, oh, don't go in there, Mike, don't go in there. I'll give you whiskey, I'll give you everything, don't go in there. And then at the end, he's kind of like, yeah, well played. Yeah. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, whether there was a deeper connection. I don't know if I believe that personally, but I have read that theory before, that actually George might be part of the thing that's happening.
It's a viable theory, because there's many arguments you could make about how they could have got around never letting this room out. For example, declaring it as a residence for perhaps one of the hotel staff.
Brick the fucking door up.
Just remove it.
No one ever knows the room's there anymore.
Exactly. You just remove that room from existence, and there you go. So there are ways around it. So endings. So the reason why we've kind of danced around this is because there are 3 endings, and we're going to go through them now. We'll go through the one that I watched. It's the most common one. So there are 3 endings to this film. In addition to the ending that appears in the theatrical release, also the default ending of the DVD, 2 other alternative endings were shot. The incentive for this was based on the director's belief that King's intention in his original short story was to leave the conclusion ambiguous. However, none of the 3 endings actually matched the ending of King's original short story. So, yeah.
Yep.
So this one is the default ending of the theatrical release, and its theatrical release DVD is also used on Amazon Prime, Netflix UK, and the YouTube Movies version of the film. So in this, Mike survives. He's pulled out of the room by some firemen, having suffered some burn injuries. And through that, him and Lily reconcile, but Lily is skeptical of his experience. While planning to move away, I guess, she finds a box of Mike's possessions that were rescued from 1408, and Mike takes out his damaged mini cassette recorder from it. And she's like, look, why don't you just throw it away? And he's kind of like, he says, sometimes you can't get rid of bad memories. You just got to live with them. He fucks around with a tape recorder and makes it work. And through that tape recorder, they don't just hear Mike's voice, but they also hear Katie's voice coming from it. And the last shot of the movie is Lily's sort of shocked face and Mike's sort of, told you, I wasn't making it up face. I don't know how I feel about this. Like I said, I didn't love that Mike survived because I felt like it would have had more impact had he gone down with the room in that sense. But I also didn't love the idea that, because that suggests more realistic ghost aspects rather than hallucinations. And
yeah, it does.
I love that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one I've seen. I haven't seen the other endings, although I know what they are. In comparison, I always actually preferred the sort of despair and desperation of the book ending, in that he still survives, but becomes a broken childlike man.
Yeah, because it's in his head, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, because I always thought that was a thing they were angling for in a movie where they said you leave 1408, but you never really do. I thought that was cool. So the director's cut. Director Mikkel Hafstrom said the ending for 1408 was reshot because, and yes, it's one of my favorite things in the world, because test audience felt that this ending was too much of a downer.
Yeah.
Really, people? Really? Too much of a downer. So, the original discarded
movie. Fucking horror movie, man.
Well, so yeah, the discarded ending had Mike dying in the fire. Happy to see the room destroyed. The ending I wanted. So there you go.
Yeah.
During Mike's funeral, Olin approaches Lily and Mike's publisher, Sam Farrell. He unsuccessfully attempts to give her a box of Mike's possessions, including the tape recorder. Olin claims that the room was successfully destroyed and it will no longer hurt anyone. He later listens to the recording in his car and becomes upset when he hears Katie's voice on the tape. He then sees a little girl in a dress walking on the cemetery grass behind the car, calling out as though she is lost. He then sees Mike's burnt corpse in the back seat. Then he sees the same girl holding hands with her father as they walk away. Olin places the tape recorder back in the box and drives off. The final scene is of the gutted room where an apparition of Mike looks out the window while smoking a cigarette. He then hears his daughter calling for him and disappears as he walks towards the door. A door is heard closing and the scene fades. This ending is the default ending on the Blu-ray release and the 2-disc collector's edition. Canadian network Space and the Movie Network and US network FX broadcast this version of the film, although Space ended their version on July 23rd, 2012. But this ending is also used on the UK and Australian DVDs and the US iTunes and Netflix version of the film. So whatever the fuck you are, you're seemingly getting a different ending. It's baffling.
Yeah, it's madness, isn't it?
But this is the ending I like. This is the ending I want.
Yeah, I think I agree. I mean, I think it's probably quite fucking telling, the fact that it's a test audience that said this was too much, whereas actually from a horror fan kind of perspective and a King fan perspective, I was like, yeah, this is a good ending.
Yeah, it would have been perfect for me. But there is one more, and this is considered other. Mike dies in the fire. Instead of the funeral scene from the director's cut, the sounds of the funeral are dubbed over shots of Los Angeles, showing Lily and Sam sorting through Mike's effects. Sam returns to his New York office and discovers the manuscript that Mike wrote while he was in room 1408. As Sam reads the story, audio from Mike's experience in the room is heard. And in the final scene, Sam's office door slams shut and Mike's father's voice says, "As I was, you are. As I am, you will be." This doesn't really make a lot of sense, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all right with that one not being there.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of like you're suddenly putting Sam as a major role when Tony Shalhoub's character Sam was in maybe a 2-minute scene where he's talking about what Mike's going to be doing in his latest book. That's about it. To then bring him back for an ending, it would have been weird.
Yeah, I agree. It feels like, well, Mikkel Hafstrom knew what he was doing, because the director's cut feels more in sync with the film.
Yeah.
Like that actually, like, well, as it was, it is what it is, isn't it? This is when he wrote this down and he said, right, this is how I want to end it.
Yep.
In the long length of the film, that's how he thought it should end. And yeah, I'm with you. I agree. Um, it's interesting to me, like, because I actually think, although I understand that the book isn't filled out as such, but I also felt that the book ending kind of made sense in a way, in a King way in particular. But the idea that, yeah, okay, so he found a way out, but it never left him. Like, you know, it still, he didn't get that reparation. You know, he's still destroyed. He's a broken man now. So he left 1408, but 1408 never left him, you know, that sort of thing. So I could almost understand, like, I can't understand exactly why that was 100% just discounted from the off. And then they went, oh, we'll discount that one, but let's have something with Sam. And it's like, well, really?
It's weird. I can only imagine if they were worried that the director's ending, so that didn't test well with audiences. If it was a downer, the King ending of a broken man having never fully escaped the room would have been just as
it would
bad.
have definitely been a downer as well.
But
yeah,
the film does hint at that, because one of the things Samuel L. Jackson talks to John Cusack about in The Office is about the people who have spent time in the room having died younger, often of diseases or heart problems and things like that, suggesting that their time in the room still affected them.
Yeah.
Which again ties into your theory around the Dark Tower, the existence of another place that's almost poisonous. The air is almost poisonous to us as human beings.
Yeah.
I think that does tie in quite nicely.
Absolutely. Yeah. And well, I mean, obviously linking back to the books again, but with what I know about every book I've ever read, like pretty much, and around the era this came out, everything's eventual came out. Like King was still very firmly on the linking to the Dark Tower, either in subtle ways or obvious ways, but it was still very much, I mean, unless I'm mistaken, Little Sisters of Illyria is in Everything's Eventual, which is
I think it is, yeah.
Direct Dark Tower story.
Yeah.
You know, so it was still part of his piece, like part of what he was doing, which was like, you know, maybe not always meaning it, but just like saying, like, you know, the Dark Tower fans might see Room 1408 as something different to like maybe a non-reader.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, because one of the things is, like, even if people, you can be like, and if it's nothing like that at all, of course it's not. The problem is, not in the problem, but because King always did that and has always linked so much to it, you are almost looking for it. Yeah. So, like, even if it's not necessarily,
it provides like an explanation sometimes, like where maybe there isn't always one required, but like it still provides it. You know, like if you, it gives it more context for me. Like this film and the book.
Makes it feel more important.
Yeah, because I don't know, like if it's just a big scary haunted room, like it's not, it doesn't have the same impact to me on my level, like where I can, you know, the idea that he's fucking opened one of those doorways, man, like he's walked in and that's where the shit goes down, mate. You know,
I didn't buy in. I didn't even think of that. It wasn't originally until the cracking of the walls, and that made me go, "Oh, that creates an image in my head."
The thing that we're like, I mean, I think even if you don't read King or anything like that, the one thing that anyone who watches the film and like reads into it and tries to analyze it and that will understand is that it's not actually a hotel room.
No,
that's not what it is. It's not a haunted, ghostly hotel room. He walks through that door and he is somewhere else.
Yes.
And that's like one of the key things, because I think if you try to look at this film and just try and oversimplify and go like, yeah, it's a big fucking scary hotel room, like it loses some of its magic. It's not a room. He's in, like you said earlier on, he's in a dark space. This is an evil place. The room is just a fucking thing. Like that's it. It just happens to be its current configuration.
There are three parts that really add credence to that as well. Two of them we actually didn't mention because we aren't going to break it down much, but I'll bring them up now. Obviously, we already mentioned the attempt to go out the window and the fact that ultimately the other walls almost don't exist.
Yeah.
And there's a part where he sees someone opposite him in another tower and he tries to get attention, but it just turns out to be a reflection of him.
Yeah.
That's it. And of course, there's a point where he crawls through the vents to escape, and those vents are going nowhere.
Yeah. So, I mean... Yeah. So once you're through that door, there is no other hotel connected to that room. Like there's no door back. There's no anything like that.
Well, there's also the thing as well when he goes out the window and they do a long shot, they kind of break out to show the size. Almost looks like a big old tower.
It looks fucking massive, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
One of the other things that like I don't know, like again, if I'm overreading sometimes, but like I thought that the director. I felt like he may have done on purpose, and it kind of worked for me, was that there were certain things that happened in the film, certain moments in the film, where I expected a thing to happen. Like he did something, and then I expected something because that's what horror did, and he never did it, and I loved him for that. So, like for example, when he looks through the peephole on the door, there was always a little bit of a feeling like the way they built up to it, like he's going to creep through there. Like I was waiting for something to jump in, or I was
Yep.
waiting for something to come through the fucking peephole and jab him in the eye.
Yeah.
Another time was actually with the climbing outside of the window, and when he comes back in the window, they spend a brief second, but it's an effective second, focusing on the way the window is perched, like it's going to suddenly come rushing down and crush it. Something I would have maybe expected in I don't know, a more run-of-the-mill kind of horror story.
Yeah, yeah.
And I felt like they were doing that on purpose, like to go, oh, could this happen? Could this happen? But no, it never did. And I love them for that.
Yeah, because the good example of the scene there as well that's done really well is that while he's trying to climb back in the window of having slipped, the woman who jumps at the window starts to go through her process, and he almost tries to keep out of her way, like as if like she's going to knock into him. I thought that was fascinatingly done as well, like that element and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There's some points I want to quickly touch upon, and we'll keep them brief, really, because a lot of what we've talked about anyway as we've gone on, which was always going to be the case. But overall, then, the acting, and I guess we have to focus on John Cusack more than anyone else. So at the start, I said, at the very start, I said, when I remember this film, I remember not liking it because of John Cusack. Obviously, hopefully, that I've expressed that I think I was completely wrong, and I think fucking hell, he's phenomenal in this and deserves a lot of props. But also the subcast, all the people involved, Samuel Jackson, and all the girl that plays his daughter, I think the acting's stellar. I've got no complaints there.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I genuinely, I mean, of everything I've ever seen John Cusack in, this is, for me, the performance of a lifetime for him. And I love the fact that he appears to have treated it that way. Like, this is not a big casted film. We haven't got loads of people. This is basically me in a space, and I've got to own this. And the gauntlet was thrown down, and like he stepped up, man. Like, I thought he was fucking phenomenal in it. And actually, it's to the point where I don't even see him as John Cusack by the end of it at all. He's just Mike, poor old fucking Mike.
That's it. Yeah, I think that's a really important thing. I think I bought into that as well. So it's really, really, really well said. What about then visuals and sound? So we're talking about the look of the movie, how it's shot as well in the hotel room, but also the sounds. So one thing I want to highlight, particularly about the visuals, is a lot of the time in the room, I love the way it's angled, or like the camera will do almost that Jaws effect where it zooms in really fast without moving, or it's off kilter to make it seem like it's dizzying. Aspects like that I love. Sound-wise, I already talked about, say, the room screams, but one thing I loved and I thought was really good for tension was how quiet a lot of the time it is, how quiet that room is.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. I was like, actually, I love the fact that they almost underuse, like they purposely underuse to allow the tension to build.
Yep.
Like every little thing like felt like not necessarily like soundtrack or anything like that, but when you had that period of silence and then maybe, I don't know, the phone would ring, or and it would be like that woman asking him what he wants for breakfast. I can't remember exactly what she would ask him on repeat, and it was just these weird conversations. I thought the sound was brilliant, but because of how underused it was, like to allow that tension to build. So yeah, I was really happy with that. Visually, I thought it was phenomenal. I loved how it looked. I loved how it felt aged, but not because it was like an old movie. It just felt aged, like because of where he had stepped to was not modern, and this was an aged place. It felt like where he was.
Although you couldn't see it, you felt like the wallpaper was yellowing through.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
and you could smell like the dust.
Watery, and you could potentially smell like old cigarette smoke in the room, or like the smell of like an old ashtray, that sort of thing. I like the footage. I like the focus, because actually for a lot of the film, like it's about centrally focused on him and showing us things in our mind's eye, like a quick shadow that passes. Was that a person who just walked by? It also has a scene that I really like, although I don't always like this, and that is one particular bit of footage, which is where he's really kind of losing it, and it focuses almost from an upward angle down on him and spins.
Yep.
And it feels insane because it's meant to feel insane, and it's not long, because if they did that for too long, I'd just get annoyed with it. It's just little subtle bang, 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 and then it's back into the chaos of the room. And I thought, footage wise, camera work, everything like that, I think it was top notch, man. I think it's 10 out of 10 stuff.
Yeah, same here. I really, really no complaints on that front as well. Particularly as well, the film does a lot of other stuff psychologically involving sounds, from a crying baby next door that builds an up enhancement to drive him a little crazy, to the point where it acts like it's deafening him, like he's losing his hearing and everything becomes muted. The sounds of sirens and things like that, aspects like that, absolutely love him. When he's in the vent, the only sound they utilize, other than the banging of himself in a vent, is the sound of a fan, and what sounds like a really powerful fan turning. Thought that was cool as well. The next one, then, it's scares. So I did obviously say at the start that I still think this movie isn't scary, and I stand by that. I don't think it's particularly scary. I get the psychological horror edge to it. What I praise it for is the tension, in the sense that I generally feel like I felt the suffocation of the room. I felt like, okay, if I was in this scenario, I probably am not lasting 1 hour. I'm probably doing 5 minutes at best, and out the fucking window I go.
Yeah, I'll be asking for that noose after like 59 on the clock. I'll be like, where's that fucking noose? I agree. Like scare is a hard word these days, isn't it?
Very hard.
Some people just like, did it make me jump? Like, this film's not meant to do that.
No.
I think it's meant to impact you, and I felt impacted. So I like, and that's the term I used at the beginning. You know, I don't think this film's scary, but it has a certain creepiness to it. It does make me, while I watch it, I feel like a sense of dread. I definitely feel for him. That's the thing. And that's partly down to the acting, but also to, you know, just to the way that the film is. Like, you never kind of come out of this. Like, there's no point in this film where I feel like, oh, I don't really care what happens to him or anything like that. And because of that, I feel like I'm angry at the room. Like, you know what I mean? I hate the fucking room. It's like, oh, leave him alone, leave him alone. Like you said, the kid scene, like it's horror, but it's psychological, isn't it? It's psychological horror, thinking man's horror, I like to call it.
Yeah, because you put yourself in a scenario. There's no single person out in the entire world that doesn't have something in their past, some history, some damaged in their life. Put yourself in that room, and then what is it going to pull from your mind and fuck with?
So, you know, like, yeah, it's weird. It's a strange one in terms of do I find it scary? Like, no, I'm not scared by the movie, but I certainly feel impacted when I watch it. Like, and that's it's because of all of it. It's because of the whole package, to be honest with you. It's not just because of him or because of the way it's been filmed or everything. The whole package. I just think they made a really cleverly paced, well put together, tense, fucking atmospheric movie. I can imagine that if I was younger, like, you know, I'm talking back to like when we was first watching horror, I think this film would have scared me. I think it would have. I think if I had then like watched this and then gone and stayed in a hotel like a week or two after or something like that, or like on my own for work or something like that, I'd have been a little bit like,
do you
know what I'm saying?
Really think about that aspect, didn't it?
Yeah. Like, so if you roll it back like 20 years or something like that, like, I think we look at it differently. But you know, you even more than me, you know, you're desensitized to this, not to horror, but to the scare factor.
Of course, I think. Sucks.
You know. And because of that, because like actually, and I am as well, and I feel like I get frustrated with jump scares. I get frustrated with volume scares. I get frustrated with all that sort of stuff. Yep. It works because you made me jump. You didn't make me jump because you're fucking scary. It's because you now woke me kid up. Jesus fucking Christ! I got to turn
loud noises. Bollocks like that.
Oh, well done. Yeah. So I really appreciate this type of horror. I really do. I'm like, wow, you get me thinking a bit, you get me feeling a little bit. And yeah, like I said, if you roll this back like 20, I don't know, 20 maybe too long, like 20, 30 years or something like that, watch this film for the first time and buy into it like with the knowledge you have now. Like, because like you said, maybe 20, 30, maybe we wouldn't appreciate the psychological side of it. But if I appreciated it the way it was now and I watched it 20, 30 years ago and then I went to stay in the hotel room, I reckon I'll be a bit on edge. I reckon I'll be a bit nervous. I'll be like, what's the number? Does it add up to 13 in any way?
The only thing that would suck is, though, I don't think all the nuances would be appreciated if you watch when you're younger. And you thought about it as well, like in the sense that like I come out of this hating a hotel room. And that's the most simplest thing I couldn't believe. I was like, I fucking hate this hotel room and I want to see it burn, you know? And that's quite incredible because I didn't even get that with the Overlook, like the Overlook from The Shining, but I get it from this single room.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm sure you have as well, but I've read more so in advance for this video, because I don't always like, if I enjoy a film, like I don't always feel the need to like hunt down reviews of the film or anything like that.
Right. Yeah.
But I was interested in, I'd always heard that this was quite a well-received film, but I didn't know what that meant from a critic kind of perspective, so I was quite interested in it. And it was quite 50-50 actually, and a lot of people appreciated it for what it was, and a lot of people just said, oh, it's no The Shining.
See, because
and I was like, yeah, but this is, I mean, this is a different film. But actually, like, like, firstly, there's no fucking comparison. Don't compare the two because they're not meant to be compared. But secondly, I think this film, from that critic kind of response of like, comparing it to the Overlook Hotel, this is not what it's meant to be, is it? This is a different fucking thing, because that is a ghost story. That is a haunting. It's a haunting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was quite disappointed when I kind of read that stuff, that people had watched this film and somehow took that from it. Like, you went all the way through this, and the only thing you took from it was, is this as good as The Shining, the two King hotel film? And it was like, dude, what the fuck?
Anyway, I feel like that's such a. I mean, any time in comparison is made to Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, I find odd anyway, because it should be no secret that The Shining film, Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, is quite vividly, vastly different to King's book, and we can get into that when we get to The Shining eventually. But like, I always find it baffling how that's the kind of pinnacle of Stephen King's adaptations, when it's one of, famously, the least well adapted Stephen King books, to the point where the author himself hates it. So it's like, why is that a comparison?
It's because it's a hotel, and that's all they took out of it, and that really disappointed me, because like we watched it, and many other people did as well, and they didn't see the hotel. Do you know what I mean? Like, yes, the hotel's there. It's a building. It's a form to start the story off, but the story is not the story of a haunted hotel. Whereas, it's a story of a broken man who ends up in a place that plays on all of his fears and inadequacies.
Yeah.
And that's what the story is. But yeah, sorry, I kind of digressed a little bit. It was only because I read those reviews, and it disappointed me so much that people had missed every bit of depth to this movie. And like, actually, it's quite a deep movie. And you're right. Like, when I was younger, I would not have picked up on half of this. It's quite possible I would, if I'd seen The Shining by the same time, I would have been like, oh, which haunted hotel movie do I prefer best?
Yeah, exactly the same.
Absolutely. I'm not saying I wouldn't have done that as a youngster, but actually, this film, I think from the psychological perspective, it's one of the better modern psychological horrors that I've seen, like overall, end to end. I think because I struggled to pick out issues with it, I enjoyed the way it's scripted. I love the pacing of it. I think the pacing of it's phenomenal. Like, they're subtle when they need to be, but they also don't hold back. Like, there's no point in like trying to make this a 3-hour fucking epic or something like that, because that would have hurt it. The acting's great. The camera footage, the feel, everything, the sound, like I'm not trying to like claim this to be the world's greatest movie or anything like that, but I feel like this probably deserves it. It's not disrespected. That's the thing about this film. Like, for a lot of King stuff, when it gets adapted, it gets a few kind of mainstreamers just go like, oh, it's the best thing that ever happened.
Yeah.
And then people realize, and they go, well, actually, it's a pretty shit adaptation, to be honest. And that happens.
It takes time. You're right. Yeah.
But this film, actually, for what it is, like, this dude, Mikkel, like, he probably took this story and like made it his own. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, he didn't just adapt Stephen King's story. He took a half-formed short story and said, I can work with this, and made this. And that's fucking phenomenal.
Yeah, although people might, what's really intriguing to me, he, based off what he did with this, he's on the level of Frank Darabont, who obviously is incredibly good at adapting King's shorter stories, bear in mind what he did. And I realize that might be sacrilege to some people, but ultimately we are talking about Stephen King adaptations here. Put 1408 up against other like great horror movies, it's not going to hold up. But put up against the wealth that comes from Stephen King content, it is in the upper echelons of adaptions. And it's not even like it's a comparative to the book, because as we've talked through, because the last part is going to be about comparisons to the book, but ultimately there's so little to make beyond because it's so basic as a short story. It's not like, oh yeah, is it superior or better? Of course it's better because it's a fully fledged movie that fits and works within that short story and does enough new clever things to build upon that world that King briefly created in that short story. I struggle to find King's opinions other than saying that he liked the movie and was quite happy with it. But I'll imagine he must.
I think that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing though, because actually King's quite vocal about when he doesn't. You know, he's been very. Oh, he's definitely been very vocal about Kubrick.
Yes,
but it's not the only one. Yeah, you know, like you said, it's whatever you call it, maximum overdrive, etc., where he's decided to step in and do it himself. You know,
good one.
So like, you know, he's not averse to calling people out that do a bad job of it. So I think if you do this and it comes out and it's well received and King comes out with a simple, I think he did a good job. Like that's about maybe as far as it's going to go. You know, like you said, this is not like a straightforward adaptation. That's the thing. Like you can't, and I don't think that's why King can't feed back on it, because King himself has spoken about the story side of it, and said that, you know, this, you know, like why he put it in Everything's Eventual. It was never even meant to be in there, but the writing one wasn't coming out for a while. The story was there. He felt it had a little bit of meat to the bones, like, you know, it wasn't fully formed on that, but he thought, you know, I'll give it to my what does he call them, constant readers. And they can have it there as a little sort of tasty tidbit, which, you know, I guess when you're Stephen King, that's okay. You can do that sort of shit, you know, and that's okay. What King does and what he did here, even for Mikel, who took this and transformed it into his own thing, King provides inspiration for people. Now, whether they take that and run with it in a good direction or a bad direction is on them. But King set the bones of the story, like the foundation. He put the sort of standing stone in there to give somebody like Mikel or whoever it was who helped to, you know, script it and everything like that, that like starting block to say, right, what can I do with this? And he took it and he ran with it and he fucking owned it, like smashed it. The King respect for me from this doesn't so much come from the fact that this came from a King book. It comes more from the fact that, you know, it's a Stephen King idea that then sparked a good movie.
Yeah.
You know, rather than a straightforward King wrote a book, someone tried to make it.
Yeah, it's, yeah, we can't do what will come up in later videos, a fully like, okay, this is a clear book, a clear story and aspects like that. And it doesn't need it. Throughout this conversation, I think it made it perfectly clear we're both very, very satisfied with 1408 as an overall product, as an overall horror movie. Weirdly enough, I wasn't as sure, but I've just checked. We haven't even reviewed this on the site. This does not have a written review. I'm not sure why, but I guess it's just no one ever got around to doing it. So probably have to change that to something. Now I know it's not there. It can be done. I think I might have thought Liam did it, but I guess not the case, because I've just searched for it. But yeah, that's episode 1. That's 1408. That's the starting block, the starting point, and it's a high point, really, because it ain't going to stay that way. Unfortunately,
say they won't all be, but yeah,
no, they won't. No, they won't. But what do you think? You know, do you agree with us? Do you think it's a very, very, very good movie with strong acting, strong visuals, strong psychological horror? But with a questionable set of endings that just depending upon where you are, depending upon what one you've experienced, you know, we're in the UK, apparently we get stuck with the happier-ish ending. Or do you hate it? Do you think it's over-exaggerated horror? Do you think it's, what's the word I'm looking for?
Shit.
Yeah, well,
not scary, gratifying, fucking stupidity.
Yeah, all of that. You know what to do. Let us know in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. You can check us out on gbhbl.com as well as on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and Tumblr. Go to Patreon and help us out over there. That's patreon.com/gbhbl, as well as Big Cartel, where you can find some of our merchandise. We have a podcast running on SoundCloud and Apple Podcasts. And of course, if you like this video, do us a favour, hit the subscribe button and help the channel grow. Games, horror and heavy metal. What else is life for?